Hello, and welcome to today's Diocesan Director discussion. Today we're going to provide an overview of our diocesan offices and how we're structured to work with all of our parishes across the diocese. I'm Dean Hoppy, and I'm honored to serve as the Chancellor and Chief Operating Officer for the Catholic Diocese of Evansville. In short, I assist Bishop Siegel in all of the strategic business and key planning matters of the diocese, and I help provide leadership and management for all of our diocesan ministries, departments, and agencies. Some of the very things we're going to be talking about over the next few minutes. Thank you for taking a few minutes to join me today digitally to learn a little bit more about our diocese and how our diocesan offices and all of our parishes exist for one another in carrying out the ministry of the Catholic Church in Southwestern Indiana. You know, whether you are new to our Catholic faith, new to our diocese, or if you're like me, born and raised a cradle Catholic right here in this diocese, you may have wondered from time to time how our parishes and dioceses fit together and how we fit within the larger church, all the way from Rome to Southwestern Indiana and your specific parish right here in this corner of the state. And if you have, I hope that you'll find this next 15 minutes or so to be especially helpful and informative to you. And even beyond that, I hope you might find that it helps you participate a little more fully in your faith, in your parish, and in our diocese. And ultimately, in our baptismal calling to live a holy life, to serve others, and to work together for the ministry and salvation of souls. So let's give that a shot. Now I'm going to start with just a really high-level overview of how we fit within the universal church. So our Pope, who is the successor to St. Peter and the supreme pastor of the universal church, is called to fulfill a mandate given by Christ to his apostles to teach, sanctify, and govern the people of God in his name. This apostolic mandate is fulfilled on the local level by our bishops, who are successors to the apostles, and they are appointed by the Pope to lead dioceses around the world. And in this apostolic ministry, the bishops then establish parishes throughout their diocese, and they assign priests as their co-workers to serve as the pastors and leaders of those parishes, and all ultimately to deliver sacramental ministry, faith formation, and works of service and charity for God's people. So that's a little bit of how our parishes and our dioceses fit together and with the larger universal church. But when we really get down to it, where the rubber meets the road, how does the diocese and all of its parishes work together to minister to its people? So let's talk about that for just a little bit. Now I'm going to stay away from a lot of the details and just try to give you a big picture view of how the diocese is structured and the work that goes on within our diocese. And so today's discussion, I will admit, is a little bit businessy. We most certainly are not here or in business for the sake of business. We are in the business of ministering for the salvation of souls. But it can take a whole lot of business to allow that ministry to happen, and we're going to talk about that business today. But let us never forget that our dioceses and our parishes exist to administer the sacraments, to form all of us more fully in our faith, and ultimately to evangelize and minister for the salvation of souls. And with that constantly in mind, let's spend a few minutes in overview of our diocese and how we're structured and funded to allow that ministry to happen. And I'd like to start with just sharing with you some of the primary statistics of our diocese. Our diocese is comprised of 45 parishes. We cover 5,000 square miles over 12 counties, from Sullivan to Mount Vernon to Du Bois and all of the wonderful communities surrounding the city of Evansville. We have 70,000 Catholics. We operate 26 Catholic schools, 22 of them elementary, 4 of them are high schools, and we're serving almost 7,200 students. We have almost 1,400 lay employees working across our diocese and well over 6,000 volunteers, and thank God for all of their work. We have 76 clergy, 48 of them are active, 28 are retired. We have 64 permanent deacons. And in this last year, we had 16 seminarians studying for the priesthood. And as we approach this new year, we anticipate adding 1, maybe 2 more to that number. And in any case, those number of seminarians represent the highest number we've had in our diocese in decades. So again, as we talk today from more of a business standpoint, but still with a spiritual focus, I'd like you to try to think about the diocese operating 3 lines of business or 3 companies. And I know that's a pretty businessy way to think of things, but I also think it's helpful in trying to understand how the diocese is structured and operates and works together with all of its parishes to deliver ministry. So let's spend a few minutes talking about each of these 3 companies today. Company number 1 represents all of the ministries and programs provided by the diocese, as well as the administrative functions. Company number 2 represents what I refer to as a deposit and loan bank, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit more in just a minute. And company number 3 represents an insurance company. And these 3 lines of business are aimed intently at helping our parishes prosper. And we specifically run these 3 companies to serve 4 major groups: our pastors, parishes, and schools, the almost 1,400 lay employees and 6,000 volunteers, all of our clergy, our deacons, and our seminarians, and of course, our Catholic faithful in the community of the diocese. So let's look just a little closer at each of these 3 companies. As I mentioned, company number 1 is all of the ministries, the programs, and the administration of the diocesan offices. And each of these departments are designed to work in 2 ways. The first is to simply assist the parishes in their work in ministering to their parishioners. And the second is to minister and serve directly to all of the 70,000 Catholic faithful across our entire diocese. So our pastoral ministries that exist within company number 1 are our Office of Vocations and the House of Discernment, Catholic schools, youth and young adult ministry, Catholic charities, catechesis and adult formation, the Office of Family and Life, Hispanic ministry, the Office of Worship, and our Office of Communications that, among many other things, provides our weekly newspaper called The Message. In addition to these various services and programs that those departments deliver, the diocese operates some other major programs. Those include all of the support, financial and otherwise, for our clergy and all of our retired priests, maintaining a robust employee retirement plan for our lay employees, providing services and facilities for over 40 retreats and well over 300 faith formation events at our Catholic Center each year, as well as overseeing and managing our safe environment and youth protection program that is so critical for all dioceses around the world. Now, the administrative functions of company number 1 would be things like the chancery, which is the bishop's office, handling all legal matters for the diocese and its parishes, maintaining all official records, and general business administration, as well as our finance and human resources group, our tribunal, who, among many other things, helps to make sure that our diocese and all of our parishes operate within canon law, our Office of Stewardship, and our technology department. And again, all of these ministries and programs are designed to assist our parishes and to minister to the faithful. Now, we're not going to discuss funding in great detail today, but I am going to touch on it a little bit in a few moments. But I will mention at this point that part of the cost of operating company number 1 does come from funds raised from the Catholic Ministries Appeal. And so just a quick note, I'm going to mention Catholic Ministries Appeal or the appeal a number of times in our discussion today. And I'd just like you to know that that is what we have known for many years as the CPC. Now, company number 2 is our savings and loan bank. Now, no, we don't operate a bank charter, but we serve as a savings and loan resource for all of our parishes. Parishes will place on deposit with the diocese their cash in excess of their most immediate operating needs. And the diocese then, like a bank, puts that money to work in a series of investments designed to produce a good, safe return on those funds. The diocese, like a bank, looks to retain just a small portion of that return to help pay for its own operation, Company 1 and Company 2, while returning the rest of the earnings to the parish. Now, the rate of return to the parish is set on an annual basis. It's based on a formula tied to the prime rate, and that rate of return is locked in for the full fiscal year. So the diocese takes all of the investment risk. The parish gets a guaranteed rate of return on their deposit without any type of required holding period for the funds like you might run into with a CD. For example, holding the funds for 6 months or 12 months. These funds are available to the parishes on demand when needed. Now, we don't have an ATM, we don't have a teller window, but a simple withdrawal request from the parish releases the funds back to them. Now, we anticipate paying our parishes between $1.5 and $2 million in interest income this next year. Additionally, the diocese grants loans to parishes when needed, utilizing a guaranteed lending rate based on a formula tied to prime. And that rate is locked in for the entire term of the loan, with favorable payback terms for the parish compared to most commercial banks. These loans are often used when a parish is conducting a significant repair or renovation, maybe building a new building, but it's also quick and easy access to financial assistance from the diocese when things might be getting a little tight within the parish. And so that's company number 2. Now, the cost of operating companies 1 and 2 are funded in part by the Catholic Ministries Appeal. In fact, between 50 and 55% of the funding for company 1 and 2 comes from the appeal, while 45 to 50% comes from other sources of funds. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So let's take a quick look at the third and final of our 3 companies. Company number 3 is our insurance company. The diocese operates a self-funded insurance program, which essentially means that we're running an insurance company. Now, self-funded programs tend to be more economical, provide more coverage flexibility. But for every property and every building in every parish in the diocese, for every event that takes place in our diocese, and for every employee and every volunteer that does something in our diocese, insurance is required. This includes medical and dental insurance for the almost 1,400 employees and all of our clergy, as well as insurance for all property, casualty, workers' comp, cybercrime, volunteer accidents, and on and on. The diocese regularly assesses risk across all of its parishes, evaluates cash on hand to pay the claims, and then establishes annual premiums to ensure that all risk across the diocese is properly covered. When an employee goes to the doctor, has a surgery, or sees the dentist, that medical provider provides the service, the employee pays their portion, and the provider then bills the Diocesan Insurance Fund, company number 3, and the diocese pays the provider for that service. If the parish incurs some type of property damage, for example, windstorm damage, which is prevalent in our area, the parish will pay a very modest deductible towards the repairs, and the Diocesan Insurance Fund will handle the rest. Now, company number 3 is funded entirely by the premiums collected for the insurance coverage. No part of the Catholic Ministries Appeal is utilized to operate company number 3. Now, as I mentioned, we're not going to get into a lot of financial details today, but just so that you have a little frame of reference for what it takes to operate these 3 companies, I'd like to share a few numbers with you. It takes between $12 and $13 million to operate company 1 and 2. But a key note here is that 72%, over $9 million of that total, goes to 5 major ministries: our Office of Vocations and all of our clergy support, Catholic Education, Catholic Charities, our lay employee retirement plans, and the interest paid to the parishes on their deposits, as we discussed in company number 2. We're also pleased to be able to say that 88 to 90% of our expenses go directly to our pastoral ministries, while only 10 to 12% go towards general and administrative expenses. It takes between $16 and $17 million to operate company number 3, with about 80% of that going to medical and dental coverages and 20% to property and liability. The Catholic Ministries Appeal covers part of the cost of company 1 and 2, but does not cover any of the cost of company number 3. Certainly, those aren't small numbers. And while I've alluded to a few of the elements of how we pay for it, I want to share just a little more detail with you on how we do pay for the operation of Companies 1, 2, and 3. Company 1 and 2 is paid for from 4 sources of funds. The Catholic Ministries Appeal, which is about 54 to 55% of the total funding. Now, it's important to note that only a few years ago, that was as much as 63 or 64%. So great strides have been made over the last few years in lowering the burden on the appeal. About 22% comes from fees charged for the programs and services delivered. About 20% comes from investment income, while about 4% comes from bequests and donations, which primarily are proceeds from endowments that we've been able to establish from many years of bequests and donations to the diocese. Company number 3 is funded entirely by premiums collected for the insurance coverage, and no part of the appeal is utilized for funding company number 3. Now, just a note or two about our Catholic Ministries Appeal, and then we'll do a little recap of our discussion today, and we can close out our time. It's always a great focus of our business side to control costs and the burden on the appeal. We certainly realize that $6+ million in the appeal total is not a small number. So, as we've discussed, the appeal provides for 50 to 55% of all of the costs of operating Company 1 and 2, while 45 to 50% comes from the other 3 sources of funds that I shared with you moments ago. And so we work diligently to control that 50 to 55% burden on the appeal. And as such, over the last 5 years, we've been able to hold the average increase of the appeal to 0.95%, while inflation nationally has been about 3.6% during that same time period. And again, we've also lowered the burden on the appeal to closer to 55%, while only a few years ago that was in the mid-60s. So while we recognize that the total number is not small, we're very pleased to be holding that number close, even while inflationary pressures have become more prevalent in recent years. So after that little bit of businessy discussion, but still with a spiritual focus, let's recap a little bit of what we've talked about today. We operate the 3 businesses of the diocese aimed intently at helping our parishes prosper and caring for our people, and specifically to serve 4 major groups: our pastors, parishes, and schools, our 1,400 employees and 6,000 volunteers, our clergy, our deacons, and our seminarians, and of course, all of our Catholic faithful in the community of the diocese. It takes between $12 and $13 million to operate Company 1 and 2, and it takes between $16 and $17 million to operate Company number 3. The Catholic Ministries Appeal funds are utilized to fund a portion of Company 1 and 2. Company number 3 does not utilize any of the funds from the Catholic Ministries Appeal. All of these things are done as we exist for one another in the universal ministry of the Church and in building God's kingdom, administering the sacraments, continuing to form all of us more fully in our faith, and ultimately to evangelize and minister for the salvation of souls. And so I'm grateful that you chose to spend a little bit of time with me today to learn a little bit more about our diocese. I hope that you may have found our discussion helpful today. Maybe you learned a thing or two that you didn't know before. I hope so. Thank you for joining me, and on behalf of Bishop Siegel and our entire diocese, thanks for all that you do in your parishes, in your communities, and in our diocese. I will keep you in prayer, and I ask that you may remember me and our diocese in prayer as well.